Okay, guys. Now, here we are. We're back on the History 1301. This is the 8 week course. We're on Section 2, Part 2 of the American Indians. Now, the Indians of the United States, there are going to be 7 of them. So, kind of bear with me. You're going to have the Southwest Indians, the people of the Great Basin, the Indians of California, the Pacific Northwest Indians, the Indians of the Plains, Southwest Indians, and the Eastern Woodland Indians. Now, we're going to kind of start off by the Southwest Indians first. These were the Indians. They lived in multi-storied houses. The Navajo, the Apache, the Mojave. Guys, these are all the Indians out west. And I will tell you, there's some of the more aggressive Indians. One of the things, and this is just a Mr. Offer theory on the American Indian, and this is not in a textbook and it's not a test question. It's just one of those things that, as a historian, I've kind of gone over and I've kind of really, and I believe it's to be true. The Indians appear, the further west your Europeans went, the more aggressive the Indians get. Guys, if you look at your Apache, your Comanche, these are very aggressive Indians. Why? Why were they so aggressive? I think the American Indian quickly realized as these Europeans are migrated to the west, they were going to lose their land, they were going to lose their way of life, and I believe the Indians became more aggressive. That's just a Mr. Offer thing. You have the Indians of the Great Basins, the Indians of California, which were basket weavers. The Indians of California, they're going to be some of the last to get any contact because they're up on that west coast. And the only way the Europeans, for the most part, till you get to Lewis and Clark, the only way that a European's going to get to them is by ship. So they're going to be somewhat isolated. The Pacific Northwest Indians up in British Columbia, uh, you know, and the Indians of the Plains. Now, one of the things I like to kind of take a really quick break here. We get to the Indians of the Plains. There is a PowerPoint. I'm looking at it. Hopefully, you can find it, and you see a teepee. One of the things I want to point out to you guys is most of us, when we think of the American Indian, we think of number one, a teepee. We don't think of the American Indian living in a multi-storied house, and we think of the Indian and the horse. And I'm going to tell you guys something. This is kind of interesting. When you look at civilizations, especially warrior civilizations, and horses, the American Indian, I mean, next to maybe the Hun, and the Hun was, Attila the Hun and that group over there in the East. The American Indian is one of the best horsemen. Guys, the American Indian is a great horseman. One of the things I always point out to my students is I teach a lot of kids, obviously, out in the country, and the first question I'll ask them is, can you ride a horse without a saddle? And they'll like, well, we can, but it's really hard to control them. And I said, think about that, guys. The American Indian did not have a saddle. They had to ride these horses bareback. Equestrian, I think is the word I'm looking for. One of the things I point out, and as we move on, we'll probably end this lecture at the Indians of the Plains, because I think it's really relevant, is the horse was not natural to this continent, guys. There were a lot of animals that weren't. The horse was not natural to this continent. The pig, the cow, the goat, none of these animals lived on the North American continent. Okay, they were brought here. Now, how'd the horse get here? Guys, when the Spaniards came in, and we're going to talk about the Spaniards' invasion from the south, and they come up through South America, okay? The Spaniard will bring with him the horse. Now, the Indian had never experienced a horse, and I always, I have an active imagination. I always ask my students, think of that first little American Indian. He sat out there, and here comes his big horse, and he's thinking, wow, that's the biggest dog I've ever seen. What in the world is that? But soon, the American Indian will take the horse, And like I said, there's a, did the Spaniards leave them? Did they get away? Who knows? I probably would imagine the Spaniards left these horses here because they were here for gold. Once they got what they needed, they left out. And these horses, once they get into the plains of North America, that will be the beginning of the Mustang. But the American Indian will take the horse. They will learn how to hunt off that horse. They are great horsemen. These are the American Indians when we talk about the Indians of the plains. So we're going to conclude this. We're still on section 2. This is part 2. We're now going to enter into part 3, which this is a 4-part series. So I hope you've enjoyed a little bit about the American Indian of the Plains, the horse Indians, and they're some of my favorite group. And by the way, this was a group that was down into Texas. So this was a group that was in Texas.